Understanding your emotions. Understanding your emotions. Okay, so today, my friends, we are going over the topic of understanding your emotions. This started off as a what is your character flaw episode, and I was going to go into the three main emotions that people feel and decipher which one fits you best, and then go over all those different topics. And I don't know, it's a long process, but it shifted just a little bit, and so I changed it. I also did not finish the script completely, so I'm going to be winging it for some of this episode, which, I mean, should be fine because I know how to speak for myself, but it may just not be as well as it could be. I'm just kidding. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing, everyone, okay? It's going to be awesome. To get started, hello and welcome to the Alpha Insight Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the importance of understanding your emotions and your feelings and how that affects you in day-to-day life. If you enjoy this episode, I would really appreciate it if you leave a rating and review. That would help me a lot on whatever platform you're listening on, or if it helps you out and you want to share it to somebody else, I would super appreciate it if you share this to somebody else or post it on your social media or whatever you want. If you could tag my social media, it's at Alpha Insight Podcast. Most of you guys know that already, unless you're new. If you're new, go check out the socials. I've got Instagram and Facebook set up right now, where I basically just try and engage my audience every week and try to get everybody's opinions and all that good stuff. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. So understanding your emotions. Today we're going to go into these three main emotions that go undiagnosed for a long time. An angry person, an anxious person, and a sad person. The three main ones. There is a couple more, but I'm going to discuss this today. Maybe you're saying, oh, I have them all. But the way I had been taught was to find the deepest one, and there is a way to find your root emotions, but to understand yourself deeper, you must push past the outer and secondary feelings. Now, just because you have one of these root emotions doesn't mean you don't feel anything else, okay? Maybe you could be feeling multiple of these at the same time, okay? So what I'm trying to do today is help you understand how to find your deepest core emotion. Because what happens a lot of the time... Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, but to get to your root emotions, you must understand, you have to push past the outer and secondary feelings, which is honestly not a super fun thing to do. What it used to consist of when I was going through this whole process was a therapist asking me how I was feeling, and then they would ask, well, how does that make you feel? And then how does that make you feel? And then how does that make you feel? And then where does that come from? Why do you feel that way? And then just keep going down and down and down until I found kind of my core emotions. And it's not super fun. It's not super fun. But what happened when I had found my root emotion, I got to understand myself better, which was super cool, actually, because I was sitting there trying to diagnose all my secondary feelings without really understanding what was really going on in my head. So I was sitting there trying to cure my depression and my anxiety and all that stuff that was going on, which were my kind of secondary emotions, without really understanding that the real root emotion that was going on was that I was angry. So it was like I was doing all this work to try and get better, but I was running in the wrong direction. So for this episode, I'm trying to help you understand a little bit which direction to go. And just because you have one of these root emotions doesn't mean you don't feel anything else, but this is the deepest feeling you get, maybe without even knowing that that's the feeling that's going on inside. Like I just said, it's like I was sitting here trying to cure all my other emotions and all my other feelings, and I was trying to fix all these other problems because I had other feelings and other emotions. I was sad and I was anxious and I was depressed and I was this and I was that and whatever. But, just because but that doesn't mean that was my core emotion. My core emotion was anger. And I didn't even really know it for a lot of the time. I didn't even know that feeling was going on. So what's the importance of this? It's a great question. What is the importance of understanding your emotions and what you're really feeling? So without understanding your true feeling, you'll be looking in the wrong places for help. You'll be trying to fix your outer and secondary feelings and emotions without touching the surface of what's really going on deep down. It's like let me try and think of the best way to do this here. It's like I have no idea even how to explain this. My brain is going completely blank right now. By the way, I am recording this episode in the morning for the first time. I've never recorded in the morning, but I figured I wanted to give it a little bit more energy and a little bit more, I don't know, something. Plus it worked out a little bit better with my schedule. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, so when you're looking in the wrong places for help, trying to fix the outer and secondary feelings and emotions without touching the surface of what's going on deep down, that's kind of like, say you have got a sickness, like the flu or something, and you go to the doctor and you tell them only some of the symptoms, or you tell them you get diagnosed for maybe a sore throat instead of the flu, which is what's actually going on. And so you're treating that sore throat, hoping that sore throat will get better, but really what's going on is that you have the flu or whatever. You see what I'm saying? I think I explained that just fine, just dandy. That's kind of like what it's like. But I was diagnosed with several forms of depression and anxiety. Let me just think. Generalized anxiety disorder, I think. Major depressive disorder. There was seasonal depressive disorder. There was something manic, something, I don't even know. There was so many diagnoses. I couldn't even keep track, honestly. And I'm a pretty calm individual. Yes, I could be wild. If you know me, I can act kind of crazy and whatever for sure. But in general, I'm mainly pretty calm. But it's unlikely you'll see me my anger show, especially in any major way. It's very unlikely you'll see my real anger. So I was treating my depression and I was treating my anxiety because I was not an aggressive person, not or angry usually. But until I understood my feelings underneath, I didn't know how to get better. So let me explain how this works. So I'm not just going in a loop this whole time and just saying the same exact thing over and over again. If you listen to my episode on my experience with the spiritual realm, you will understand that after my sister was diagnosed with cancer, I'd become very angry with God. After all that had happened, I was furious with God. And I hid that anger. I buried it. I'd forgotten about it. I let it grow in the shadows. And I became sad. I became depressed. You may say I became depressed, you might say. I was anxious. I was just barreling through life hoping I wouldn't wake up in the morning. I felt lost and lonely and tired. I was disappointed in myself, which are all secondary emotions for sadness. I was isolated, burnt out. I was numb a lot of the time. I was hurt. And then there was the feeling of being anxious, worried, fragile, which are all secondary emotions of anxiety. And I just didn't get it. But at the same time, deep down, I was furious. With all this going on, it was like a pot just boiling, like of boiling water that was just slowly getting hotter and hotter. It was almost like I could get sad. This is how it was like. It was like I would get sad, and then I would get angry at myself for being sad. And then I'd be even more sad because I mentally beat myself down, and I would tell myself terrible things. And then I would get anxious because sadness means I was going to have another sad, lonely night, which would make me get angry all over again, and it would loop over and over again until I would take it out on myself, either mentally or through self-harm, until the cycle restarted the next day. Well, I thought my anger was secondary to depression and sadness and anxiety. It was really the one emotion that would always be there. Let me explain this. So it was that emotion where I didn't necessarily feel it all the time, but it was like I felt it all the time. It was like buried deep down, and it was like that one emotion where I would always come back to. I would always find a reason to be angry with like myself most of the time, like 99% of the time. But then I would get sad, because I didn't think anger, you can't treat anger. You can't, there's no fix for anger, but really there really is. There's a lot of different ways to help you out there with all that. And going to the gym was one of those things. And I still go to the gym when I'm angry, and I love it. It's the best. It's like, what I used to do was I used to work a job where it was very physically demanding. I guess I was tired all the time because I was just it was manual labor. It was hard stuff. So I had the system to keep my anger in check, which you may think it sounds dumb, but it really it worked a lot. What I used to do was I'd go to work, which was physically exhausting, and then I'd go to the gym as soon as I got home. So then I would have absolutely no more energy to be angry. I would have no energy to let out anymore. And then I would spend the rest of the night working on some sort of homework, or just learning about something new, using my brain to think about things and process things so that I was not only physically exhausted every day, but I was mentally exhausted. And then I had no room for anger at the end of the day. And that actually worked out for me for a long time, but now it's a little bit different. But, just because you may be, and also just because you may be diagnosed with something doesn't make that true. And I'm definitely going to be going over that in a further episode for sure. But just because you're diagnosed with something doesn't mean that that's your true reality. And it doesn't make you hopeless. So let's get deep and view those core emotions for you and the behaviors that angry and people have are. Okay, my friend. So while I thought the anger was secondary to depression, sadness, and anxiety, it was really the one emotion that would be there, that would always be there. So let's view these core emotions just a little bit. A lot of the time what happens is you feel more of the feelings for another core emotion instead of your actual core emotion. If you're an angry person, depending on how you deal with your feelings and emotions, you could express them or feel them in different ways. And a lot of times we feel one thing and interpret them as another. So what I'm trying to do here is help you understand your feelings just a little bit better. You know what? to make this understandable just a little bit better, I would really suggest you take a look at what's called an emotion wheel. Just look it up online, emotion wheel. You'll understand a lot more what I'm talking about, and it's actually really helpful for understanding your emotions and all that good stuff. But depending on if you're an angry person, depending on how you deal with your feelings and emotions, you could express them or feel them in different ways. And a lot of times we feel one thing and interpret them as another. So you may have more than one core emotion. It doesn't have to be just one. But what I'm doing here is making you aware of why you act the way you do, behave the way you do, and think the way you do. And discovering your core emotions helps you understand what drives your feelings, which determines your actions. So what I want you to do, this activity is not going to take an hour. It's not even going to take half of that. It's a quick idea for you. Take a look at an emotion wheel. Just look it up online. They're not hard to find. Once you have that in front of you, I want you to write down some of your feelings that may or may not be on that wheel. You may be thinking, well, Jamison, I have all the feelings. That's okay. Today I want you to be aware of how you feel on a daily basis, even an hourly basis. You cannot change your mindset if you don't take the time to figure out where you're at in the first place. You can't treat something if you don't know what it is you're treating. So now that you've found your most common emotions, I want you to dwindle it down. Which 5 of those would you choose to describe yourself most accurately? And then from there, maybe dwindle it down one more time to which 3 of those main feelings describe yourself most accurately. What are the 3 main feelings you feel constantly, or maybe the most intense? And by doing that, you get a little insight into what your core emotions are. Link up those feelings with the core emotions on the emotion wheel, and you've got yourself somewhat of an answer. It's hard to accurately describe yourself sometimes, but that's why I want to do this exercise, because you become more self-aware of yourself, and you become more aware of what's really going on in your mind. For this week, though, I really want you to really think about these things. So you may be thinking, maybe you have 3 different emotions that link to 3 different core emotions, and that's okay. And it's really hard to help you when I'm not talking with you right now, but I am talking with you, and I'm going to do my best to help you understand this. Start to ask yourself, this, maybe it doesn't have to be all today. You could do this over the span of this week until next week's episode or whatever. Just start to ask yourself, though, like, why do you feel blank? To each one of your main feelings that you feel constantly. Why do you feel sad? Why do you feel furious all the time? Why do you feel that little bit of anxiety? And that brings you to the why instead of the what, really brings you to understanding what's going on inside your mind. Well, I'm anxious because I don't know what the future is, or I guess that's why anxiety is a thing. That's all anxiety is because you're thinking about the future. I don't know. I keep seeing this thing, and it was like, I don't even know how to say it anymore. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. If you're angry, you're living in the past. But when you're at peace is when you're living in the present. And it goes something like, and that's why they call it the present. I don't know, something like that. It's really cool. But it's hard to accurately describe yourself sometimes. So this week I want you to really dig deep and think about these things. Find out what your core emotion is. And then in further episodes, we'll uncover how to deal with each of these core emotions and whatever. But then we also have to get into why you feel that way, which I think is an even more important question than what is why. For now, I would encourage you to just find those main emotions that you feel all the time, that emotion that you always come back to. Maybe that emotion that just loops on and on in your daily life, in your head. For me, it was anger. It was like I would get angry about something, and then I'd get sad about something, and then I'd be angry with myself that I was sad. And then I would get anxious, and I'd get more angry at myself, and it was just always looping back to anger. But the goal for you this week is just to find what your core emotions are. All right, now, with all that said, my friend, I'm going to call it an episode. I hope you learned something, and I hope you find your core emotions. And honestly, if you find these things, you could message me on Instagram. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. And if you did enjoy this episode as well, I couldn't thank you enough if you shared this to a friend who might benefit from listening today, or share a link on social media, or whatever. I need to get it out there, and if you could help in any way. I know it takes a little bit of time out of your day to do this, but I would be super grateful if you could help me out here. With all that said, my friend, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. I guess I will see you next week.